You're listening to the only MMA radio show in Ithaca, Shadowboxing, with your host, Dan Doherty, only on VIC Radio, Ithaca. Hello and welcome to Shadowboxing here on VIC Radio. I'm your host, Dan Doherty. And for VIC Radio purposes, the song you just heard before that was Wool in the Walsh by Crying. Now let's get into it. The layoff of UFC is finally over. This weekend, we get some action from Mexico City with UFC Fight Night, Dos Anjos versus Ferguson. That's going to be fun. Awesome fight. But first, let's take care of some UFC news. Biggest fight announced this week was Dominick Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt. I talked about this when it was heavily rumored, so I won't go into too much detail now. But, hey, it's official now. Co-main event of UFC 207 behind Ronda Rousey and Amanda Nunes. What an awesome card that is. Johnny Hendricks versus Neil Magny, Cain Velasquez versus Fabricio Verdum, Dominick Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt, ending with Ronda Rousey and Amanda Nunes. Great stuff on New Year's Eve, December 30th. So, the big question is, does Cody Garbrandt deserve that title shot? It was between him and TJ Dillashaw. Dillashaw made a push on social media, did not get the shot. Cody Garbrandt, with his knockouts and his neck tattoos, his good looks, his exciting style, definitely helped him get the shot. Already has a feud going with Dominick Cruz. They can definitely sell this fight. Cody Garbrandt coming off of that great knockout against Takeya Mizugaki. Before that, knocking out the very promising Thomas Almeida in a main event on Fox Sports 1. But can he knock out Dominick Cruz? Can he catch the man you can't hit? Dominick Cruz, easily the best defensive fighter in all of MMA, in my opinion. I think that's a pretty well-shared opinion. His footwork, his head movement go pretty much unmatched in mixed martial arts. You don't see anyone fight like Dominick Cruz does, bouncing around for 25 minutes. And as we saw against Uriah Faber, he's got some power too. He knocked down Faber twice in that fight. And of course, he knocked out Takeya Mizugaki too. So, this is not going to be an easy fight, I should say, for Cody Garbrandt. But he does have 25 minutes to catch him with one of those bombs that he can throw. That's the big question of this fight. Can Cody Garbrandt find a way to catch a target that's always moving, that never gives you a good angle? It's fun fight. Cody Garbrandt's young. He's getting a shot pretty early on into his career. He's only 11-0 in his MMA career and only 4-0 in the UFC. 5-0, actually. 5-0. And, yeah, he's got a very exciting style. He's knocked out 4 of his 5 opponents. Marcus Brimage, Augusto Mendez, Thomas Almeida, and most recently Takeya Mizugaki. His huge hooks are the weapons that do it for him. And, of course, Dominick Cruz is the second best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, or best, depending on who you are. It's either him or Demetrius Johnson, and I guess Cruz has a win over Demetrius Johnson, so maybe you put him there. Maybe you give Dominick Cruz that top spot. But he's definitely on people's radars again after taking 2 years off for a variety of injuries. And then another year off after that, after another knee injury. But it's good to have him back. Looked excellent against TJ Dillashaw. Looked excellent against Uriah Faber. Now he faces a power hitter in Cody Garbrandt. And you always think that power hitters play right into Dominick Cruz's style, because they're depending on that big knockout blow, and Cruz's game revolves around not letting you get that knockout blow. I expect Cruz to mix in his wrestling too. We haven't really seen anybody try to wrestle with Cody Garbrandt. Augusto Mendez tried and failed and got put on his backside after trying. But yeah, Dominick Cruz is one of the best at flowing his movement into his takedowns. He ducks one way with his head movement, then in that same motion, he's taking you down with a double leg. So pretty he's my favorite fighter to watch easily. He's just so fascinating. Just the way nobody fights like him. Nobody fights like him, and that's what makes him so special, and that's what makes him a dominant champion. So very excited to see that fight, December 30th from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. That's gonna be fun. What an event that is. Matt Brown versus Tarek Saffiedine also. Tim Means versus Alex Oliveira. Awesome stuff. Also, Max Holloway versus Anthony Pettis, UFC 206. Everyone wants UFC 206 to get that next big fight. Well, here's one. Anthony Pettis versus Max Holloway, two of the best featherweights on earth. It's pretty weird calling Anthony Pettis a featherweight after he held the lightweight title for a bit. But, hey, that's where he is now, and he made the cut. He looked good against Charles Oliveira. Mixed in some takedowns and survived with Oliveira on his back multiple times, which is impressive in its own right. And he had those nasty body kicks on Oliveira too. So he looks good good at 145. It stopped his bleeding. He was on a 3-fight losing streak before that. And now he gets the best featherweight contender on earth, Max Holloway. Holloway's in his mid-20s, very, very young, but he's fought a ton of times in the UFC already. He's on a 9-fight win streak. 9-fight win streak. He has not received his title shot yet. And, of course, Conor McGregor kind of helped, or hurt that situation, I'd say. Kind of hurt that situation by leaving the division for a bit and taking the title with him. So now Jose Aldo's the interim champion, and Max Holloway is the rightful top contender after Frank Yeager lost to Jose Aldo. So now Max Holloway has to get past yet another contender. He just beat Ricardo Lamas. And now he gets Anthony Pettis, the former lightweight champion, with his awesome kicks. Yeah, at this point, with 8 straight wins, you expect Max Holloway to just sit down and wait for his chance. But man, he's as game as they come. And those last 20 seconds of Lamas versus Holloway definitely proved that when he pointed at the ground and they just started swinging at each other at UFC 199. What a great fight that was. And it seems like Aldo's going to wait to see what happens with Conor McGregor instead of fighting a contender with his interim title, and you can't really blame interim champions for doing that. They get a guaranteed title shot. You don't really want to put it at risk by fighting a top contender, a really dangerous top contender. But I don't think Conor McGregor's coming back to featherweight. I think that's pretty clear. If he wins against Eddie Alvarez, they said he'll abandon one of his belts. You have to assume it's the one that makes him cut a ton of weight to get to that division. But Jose Aldo's still in the UFC. Seems to be on good terms with the UFC now after threatening to retire, threatening to never fight again, threatening to throw fights. But he met with the upper brass of the promotion, and now they seem to be on good terms, which is good. But back to the fight. Max Holloway versus Anthony Pettis. Holloway very lanky for 145er. Anthony Pettis, not really a similar stature. He's a little more stocky with stocky's not putting it correctly, but you know what I mean. He's a little more built because he's a 155er coming down. So UFC 206 now doesn't have that huge name that would make the perfect sandwich between Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey, but not a bad card. This will make for a really good Fox card. 4-fight main card. It would be Cormier Johnson, the main event, light heavyweight championship, their rematch. Max Holloway versus Anthony Pettis in the co-main. Doo Ho Choi versus Cub Swanson, which is an awesome featherweight fight. I can't wait for that. And Nikita Krylov versus Misha Serkinov, two of the best light heavyweight prospects out there. That's a really good Fox main card, 4 fights, but pay-per-view in between McGregor and Rousey, not really appeasing that Canadian crowd. Tough. It's tough. But the GSP situation is still in motion. Apparently, they're still working things out. His contract's not terminated, according to the UFC. And Michael Bisping claimed that he signed on to fight GSP. And GSP said, I'd love to fight you, but we're still working things out, me and the UFC. How crazy would that be? GSP coming back to fight for the middleweight title in 2016. Awesome. That would be awesome. But hey, can't blame Michael Bisping for wanting to take some money fights before all the contenders get ready. But I mean, it was pointed out to me that all these contenders are fighting each other. I'm talking about Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero and Jacare Souza versus Luke Rockhold. So they're all fighting each other because Michael Bisping took that fight against Dan Henderson, who certainly did not deserve the title shot, but it was a score to settle for Michael Bisping, and he did settle that with a nice decision victory. Close decision victory, though. I mean, he got knocked down twice. But still, he finally did settle his score. And he got to defend his title, which is really tough to do in 2016. So yeah, UFC 206. December 10th, that's the night after the Albany card. And the first of 2 UFC pay-per-views of December. So you get that, and then 20 days later, you get UFC 207, which I just talked about earlier. December's going to be a fun month, and November also very strong month for the UFC. They have 2 events running on the same day, November 19th, UFC Sao Paulo and UFC Belfast on the same day. It's been a while since they did the 2 events in the same day thing, but man, that's a lot of fights. I'm already scared of how the episode of the show afterwards is going to go. I have to watch 24 fights. Other big news. Big is the correct word here. Shane Carwin, former heavyweight champion, interim heavyweight champion of the UFC. He's gone over to Japan to resume his fighting career. He was retired for quite a long time. Now he's back in Japan in Rizin for their open weight tournament. He said he was offered Fedor Emelianenko as a fight. Fedor declined the fight. And now Carwin is fighting in the open weight tournament. He can still knock out people with the jab, probably, with the size of his fist and the size of him, really. He's cutting down a lot of weight to get to 265. Just a massive, massive human being with a ton of power. It's going to be cool to see him fight again, though. He's dealt with some injuries in the past. So hopefully he stays healthy, and hopefully we get to see him fight in Rizin. That's a scary man. He did recently just fight radio host Jason Ellis with his arm tied behind his back, and he still knocked him out with just the left hand. Clean. It was clean knockout, too. Beautiful stuff. Yeah, so Shane Carwin back in the ring. Rizin has a ring, not an octagon, not a cage. So Japan's going to love him. They love their larger-than-life, superhero-looking figures. And Shane Carwin definitely fits that build. So Fedor declined Shane Carwin, and now it's being reported by Flow Combat that Fedor Emelianenko will fight former UFC heavyweight Matt Mitrione in 2017. Interesting. It's very interesting. Fedor did not look good in his fight against Fabio Maldonado, who was a small light heavyweight in the UFC. Maldonado battered him for 5 minutes in the first round. knocking him down again and again and again, but it was in Russia, so the fight was allowed to go on by the referee. And then the judges ended up giving Fedor the fight after he kind of won the last 2 rounds, pretty close. But if that Fedor shows up against Matt Mitrione, I don't expect the night to last long for him. Mitrione has a lot of knockout power. We saw that against Derek Lewis and in his first Bellator fight where he was knocked down and then came back later to knock out his opponent. Mitrione, very athletic, a former football player, and yeah, he had a good UFC career. Ended on a pretty low note after getting choked out by Ben Rothwell, and then getting his eye poked out by Travis Brown. That wasn't the most graceful exit to the UFC. It was a pretty undeserved loss, I should say. Brown poked him a ton of times in the eye, but the referee did not dock him any points and did not force any penalties. Did not even disqualify. I mean, that could have been disqualifiable offense. And yeah, Mitrione couldn't even see out of his eye. It was just a balloon. And then Travis Brown TKO'd him in the third. But now he's in Bellator. He's 2-0 in Bellator. And he gets Fedor in his third fight. So I guess if you're Bellator, you gotta take advantage of who you have at heavyweight. They're pretty much letting their heavyweight champion walk, the Russian Vitaly Minakov. He expects to be in the UFC soon. So now that heavyweight division is wide open, they can make any fight a championship fight, really. Bellator's heavyweight division is subpar, to say the least. You got Czech Congo, Mitrione Fedor, Tony Johnson. I mean, it's not a very deep division, though. Next is Uriah Faber announcing that his fight in Sacramento, his hometown, on December 17th will be his last. Pretty long career for Uriah Faber. He was 9-6 in the octagon, but four of those misspoke there. 4 of those were championship contests, and the other 2 came against Jimmy Rivera, who is now one of the top contenders at bantamweight, and Frankie Edgar, of course, one of the best featherweights on earth. So Uriah Faber never held that UFC gold, but he was dominant in the WEC. He defended his belt quite a few times, but never got it back after Mike Brown beat him the first time. Mike Brown beat him in the rematch in the WEC, and Faber went on to lose title fights against Dominic Cruz, Henan Barao twice, and unfortunate for Faber that he never got to hold that UFC gold. But the man knows what he's doing. He has a long career ahead of him, running Team Alpha Male, running the laundry list of other business ventures he's in. He's opening another Uriah Faber gym in California too. So yeah, he's set for the future. And he's got a ton of prospects to work with at Team Alpha Male. Paige Van Zandt, Cody Garbrandt, among others. Josh Emmett, he's also fighting on the Sacramento card. Yeah, he's built quite the team out there in Sacramento, giving them all housing and everything. And just the UFC gold is it's rare that Team Alpha Male holds that gold. I think TJ Dillashaw is the only fighter in that gym to hold a UFC belt. And now he's gone. He's off in Denver at Team Elevation. But they have a lot of top contenders. Chad Mendes, Joseph Benavidez, Cody Garbrandt now fighting for the title. So very, very strong team. They don't get injured often. But it's been a long and great career for Uriah Faber. Competitive till the end. And he does have a very winnable fight against Brad Pickett, who has been subpar in the UFC. His record is 5-7 in the octagon. And he just got crushed by Yuri Alcantara in his home country of England at UFC 204. Before that, he did beat Francisco Rivera, but many fans felt that Rivera was the one that won the fight. Pickett ended up taking a hometown split decision in that one. They call him one punch, doesn't have a lot of knockout power. He did knock down Thomas Almeida twice. I don't expect him to give Faber many problems, though. It's not like a Jimmy Rivera where you're fighting an up-and-comer. You're fighting a guy in Brad Pickett that is at the end of his road. Hasn't had a clear dominant win in quite a long time. So it's a good fight for Faber. It's not a big name, but you get a win in front of your home crowd. You call it a day. Call it a career. And you move on to coaching your team. But it's a fun event overall. December 17th with Paige Van Zandt and Michelle Waterson in the main event. That's going to be an awesome fight. Got Alonzo Ban and Mike Perry also on the card. Mickey Gall versus Sage Northcutt. Just a fun card. On Fox, too. Part of that December run the UFC's making. More immediate news, November 19th, UFC Belfast. Needed a new main event after Gunnar Nelson revealed that he injured his ankle. He actually injured his ankle on Facebook Live on the UFC's page. The UFC was live streaming an open workout of Gunnar Nelson. And then about a minute into the video, you can hear Nelson's ankle just crack on a takedown attempt. And he still went on to finish the training session, but then revealed that he did injure his ankle in that video. So pretty unfortunate that injury is now. Everyone can see when it happened, where it happened. He was supposed to fight Jung Young Kim, which would have been an awesome main event. But instead, we get another awesome main event on a couple weeks' notice, 2.5 weeks' notice. Gegard Mousasi steps up to take on Uriah Hall. They get both guys on 2.5 weeks' notice, so great work from Joe Silva putting that fight together really quickly. Gegard Mousasi wanted a fight against Uriah Hall. Of course, Uriah Hall knocked him out brutally with a spinning back kick to the face and then a flying knee to follow up. He, since then, has gone 3-0 and asserted himself as a top 5 middleweight contender. And Uriah Hall has done pretty much the opposite, losing to Robert Whittaker in a clear 15-minute decision where Whittaker just boxed him up. Uriah Hall, I should say. I go from Uriah Faber story to Uriah Hall. That's not easy. But, Uriah Hall tried his unique techniques of wild kicks and everything, but Robert Whittaker, his disciplined jab, just put an end to that stuff pretty quickly. First round of that fight, the first one, Mousasi versus... I should say that after the Whittaker fight, Uriah Hall did go on to get knocked out by Derek Brunson in the co-main event of UFC Hidalgo. That was last month, or 2 months ago. Oh wait, it's still October. It's October 30th. So it was last month. Losing track of the date here. So in that first fight, Gegard Mousasi versus Uriah Hall, Mousasi won the first round pretty clearly, took down Uriah Hall, controlled him, ground and pound and everything. And it was just a very one-sided, clear victory for Mousasi. Then round 2 starts, and Uriah Hall out of nowhere pulls out that spinning back kick and knocks out the veteran. So you can see why that loss bothers Gegard Mousasi so much, especially now as a top contender. That loss did set him back quite a bit. But now he's back. 3 straight awesome victories. Knocking out Thiago Santos and Vitor Belfort. Taking no damage in the Vitor Belfort fight. So he gets right back in the octagon. Fought Belfort last month, or this month. I'm doing it again. This month, early October. Took no damage in that second round TKO. And gets right back in there November 19th, main event against Uriah. I think he should win this fight pretty easily. Uriah Hall has not looked the same since that fight. Looked fairly weak and not tough to deal with at all. So Mousasi, one of the best game planners at middleweight. If he feels like wrestling you, he can take you down for 3 rounds. If he feels like keeping you at the end of his jab for 3 rounds, he can do that. Or if he feels like taking you out in 2, he can do that. One of the most versatile middleweights on earth. And if something wrong happens to one of those top contenders that deserves the title shot, those 4 top middleweights I mentioned before, Romero, Weidman, Souza, Rockhold, if one of them gets the title shot but is injured up to the fight, expect Gegard Mousasi to jump right in and take that title shot if he gets past Uriah Hall first. Also, the card now has a new co-main event too. So UFC Belfast taking some hits pretty late. James Krause pulled his hamstring, or tore his hamstring, and will not be fighting Ross Pearson in the co-main event. Instead, we get Stevie Ray, Scotland's own Stevie Ray, stepping in for James Krause. So Ray doesn't have that far to travel. Scotland to Northern Ireland, not a very long journey at all. He's a very fun fighter to watch. He lost his last fight against Alan Patrick and didn't look bad, though. Patrick kept taking him down, but when it was on the feet, Stevie Ray was giving him issues. Ross Pearson coming off that July loss against Will Brooks. He looked good in that fight, too. Brooks didn't dominate him. In fact, the 3rd round, Ross Pearson kind of dominated Brooks. So, yeah, Ross Pearson, not bad at lightweight. I also skipped one fight for Ross Pearson. He did lose to Jorge Masvidal in between then and now. So he's coming off 2 straight losses. And now he gets Stevie Ray, who's looking to rebound and get back into the win column on his own. Short notice. But, yeah, UFC Belfast losing both its main and co-main event. Still a strong card, though, in my opinion. A strong, at least, main event and co-main. I do like those fights. And I believe that fight will be on Fight Pass. And the Sao Paulo card is on Fox Sports 1. Same day. Crazy. It's a lot of fights. Lyman Good, the first tragedy of UFC 205. He was pulled from his contest after USADA caught him. A pre-fight drug screening from early October. And he was supposed to fight Bilal Muhammad on the prelims. And he has not fought since July 2015. He pulled out of a fight in December of last year, and this was supposed to be his comeback fight on the biggest card ever, as the only New York City native on the card in Madison Square Garden, but he blew it. He got busted for anti-doping policy. We don't know what exactly the substance is yet. That's up for Good to disclose. But expect a 2-year suspension to come down on him, and losing a spot in UFC 205 is punishment enough. The 2-year suspension will just is not going to help him at all. That's insult to injury. And now, as a result, Bilal Muhammad gets Vicente Luque. There's also a recent tweet was dug up by Olawale Bamgose. He tweeted out a picture of Lyman Good and himself after a training session, and the caption of the tweet called them unnatural beasts. Unnatural, not the word you want to use. Just bad foreshadowing. It was later revealed that Lyman Good was busted by USADA, so yeah. Unnatural beast is an accurate description, I guess. We'll see if Olawale Bamgose, there's a silent B in there, unless it's not silent. Tough name to pronounce. I believe he got a replacement opponent for December 9th in Albany. He was supposed to fight the late Josh Saman, but Saman passed away, tragically. So now, Bamgose, still on the card, though. Jamaican fighter. But Bilal Muhammad versus Vicente Luque, awesome fight for UFC 205. Vicente Luque was a standout on The Ultimate Fighter 22. Black Zillions versus American Top Team. And he's 3-1 in the UFC. He lost his UFC debut to Michael Graves. Graves, a tough wrestler. Not the kind of guy you want to face in your UFC debut. I always bring that up, how you don't want to fight tough wrestlers or tough pressure fighters in your debut. And Michael Graves, even though he was making his UFC debut that night, he definitely fits that build. But since then, Vicente Luque has pulled off 2 submission victories and a knockout. The knockout was just brutal. UFC Hidalgo against Hector Urbina. 1 minute into the fight, and Luque swarmed Urbina and just nailed him. With a right hook. And everyone knows him as a very tricky jiu-jitsu player. But if you add power to that, man, that's a dangerous fighter. A fighter to keep an eye on at welterweight. But he gets the very tough and very game Bilal Muhammad, who is no longer fasting. He fasted for his UFC debut against Alan Jouban, and still very, very competitive in that fight. Was knocked down 3 times and ended up winning the 3rd round. Just brilliant stuff in that fight. And then he ended up winning at UFC Hidalgo against, same card, against Augusto Montano. Used a lot of head kicks in that fight. We didn't see that much against Alan Jouban. But he was pressuring Montano with a bunch of head kicks, using his takedowns too. Just beautiful takedowns, mixing up his levels very well, and ended up TKOing Montano in the second round. I will be interviewing Muhammad before UFC 205, so I'll ask him all about that situation with Lyman Good and his new opponent, Vicente Luque. But I've talked to him before, and he sees all opponents the same. Doesn't matter who you are. You're just another body for Belal Muhammad. Doesn't do any specific training for any fighters. Just goes out there and does his thing. And he's really, really fun to watch. Former Titan FC champion. 1-1 in the UFC. But entertaining all around. Another fight announcement. Ray Borg versus Luis Smolka at UFC 207. Luis Smolka coming off that very, very disappointing loss against Brandon Moreno. He really wants to bounce back from that one, and he gets Ray Borg, a tough grappler. Kind of plays into Luis Smolka's game. Ray Borg has not fought in quite a while. He was beat down by Justin Scoggins, and since then he pulled out of a fight with Ian McCall. I believe he pulled out of another fight with Ben Nguyen. Now he gets Luis Smolka at UFC 207. Borg, at his best, is going to wrestle you, take you down, keep taking you down, and hold you down. But you can't really do that against Luis Smolka. He's very, very tricky on the mat. One of the better scramblers at flyweight. And he's got a very, very well-rounded jiu-jitsu game. He got lazy against Brandon Moreno. That's kind of the only way to put it. He didn't really give Moreno any respect. Took him down with his neck exposed against Moreno. He wanted to use that to just get the side control, but Moreno brilliantly blocked the pass and kept him in guard for the guillotine and submitted him from there. So I'm not selling short what Moreno did, because blocking Smolka's pass was just incredible and exactly what he needed to do to win that fight. And I'm just saying that Smolka did take him lightly. I think it was pretty clear with the way he fought. He just came forward and expected to just take him down and submit him, but Moreno's not an easy go. He was the champion in WFA, was the promotion, and then he got called up to the Ultimate Fighter, the Tournament of Champions, as the 16th seed. 16th seed on the Ultimate Fighter, and he beats a top 10 flyweight. I've said this in the past. It just goes to show how stacked the talent of this season's Ultimate Fighter is. But too little, too late for that show, though. They really need to pull something together to get those ratings back. But I do hear that the fights this season are the best that they've ever been. All finishes. Tim Elliott just got a finish in the last episode. Former UFC flyweight. Only lost to the best. Only lost to Joseph Benavidez, not Juicy Formiga, Zach Makovsky, and John Dotson. But that fight is a very good fight. I do expect Smolka to win with his jiu-jitsu. Won't be taking Borg lightly. Last bit of news. World Series of Fighting has signed two-time judo gold medalist Kayla Harrison to their roster. She won 2 golds for the USA in her career, last 2 Olympics, at 170 pounds in that division. She says she will be cutting to, or for mixed martial arts purposes, she believes she can cut to 145. She says 135 is just out of the picture. She said she had to cut off a leg to make it that far down. But hey, Ronda Rousey won bronze. It really makes you wonder what Kayla Harrison can do in the cage with 2 gold medals under her belt. So as good as it gets in the judo game, now trying her hand at mixed martial arts, she will be debuting. It will be quite a while until she debuts. She says she wants to take a year to train and everything. That's completely understandable. She's taking some classes at the Renzo Gracie Academy in New York City. Doing the right thing. And taking some advice from Ronda Rousey. She definitely has the right person to look to. An old friend of hers, an old teammate of hers in judo. So yeah, she's signed with Ali Abedaziz's management company, and of course that management company has very strong ties with WSOF. And Harrison will also be serving as a commentator and a public figure for WSOF. So she's definitely getting her money's worth. WSOF is getting their money's worth. But interesting signing there. I think it's good that she didn't sign to the UFC right away. I mean, it would help if the UFC had a division for her, but they don't serve the women's featherweight division. Rightfully so, there's really no one there. But WSOF will find people for Harrison to fight. Gonna be interesting to see what her game looks like. We've seen Henry Cejudo, who won a gold medal in wrestling in the Olympics. We've seen him kind of abandon his wrestling game. He likes to strike with guys. His second fight in the UFC, he did use his wrestling, and he did take down Demetrius Johnson. Other than that, he does like to just stand up and strike with guys, just to prove his worth, it seems, because he does have a very, very strong wrestling game. So another gold medalist in MMA. Fun stuff. Take a short break here. Be back with a quick breakdown of this weekend's card. UFC Mexico City, headlined by Rafael dos Anjos and Tony Ferguson. You are listening to Shadowboxing here on VIC Radio. Stay tuned. Be right back. This weekend, fights are back. Rafael dos Anjos and Tony Ferguson headlining UFC Mexico City on FS1. It's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks since we've received some UFC action, and it feels good. Looking forward to these fights. It doesn't feel like a task to watch fights every weekend, like it was during that 8-week run. A nice 3-week break makes you really look forward to whatever fights you can get. And, of course, it makes UFC 205 next week that much bigger. So, this weekend, solid main card. From the top, Rafael dos Anjos versus Tony Ferguson. Co-main event, Diego Sanchez versus the debuting Bellator standout Marcin Held. Then you get Ricardo Lames, who was supposed to main event UFC Manila. That fight card canceled. Ricardo Lames gets moved here, and he takes on Charles Oliveira instead of BJ Penn, who he was scheduled to fight. Benil Dariush versus Rashid Magomedov. Just an awesome lightweight fight. And then the debuting Alexa Grasso from Invicta against Heather Jo Clark. Looking forward to what she looks like in the octagon. Fight Pass prelims headlined by Sam Alvey versus Alex Nicholson. And then Eric Perez, El Goito takes on Felipe Aranches. Solid card. Guido Canetti, I should say, quick note. Guido Canetti is supposed to fight Marco Beltran, but he was pulled from the card, Canetti, for USADA violation. So we'll see if they do get a replacement to take on Beltran. Beltran's very fun to watch. in the octagon. He's pretty wild with his kicking techniques. So hopefully he gets an opponent. But hey, it's a week out. I'll have to really be searching far and wide to get someone to step up against him. Well, the main event, the two top contenders at lightweight, Rafael dos Anjos and Tony Ferguson. What a matchup this is. Dos Anjos is a pressure-first fighter. His MO is to push forward and just constantly be throwing punches and keeping you off balance. And we saw that work to perfection against Anthony Pettis. And then, of course, he took the fight to Donald Cerrone in his first title defense and knocked him out very quickly in the first round. Tony Ferguson, he is built on a very unorthodox style on the feet, very lanky, but his best work is on the mat. His Darce choke is just brilliant. He submitted Edson Barbosa with it, among a couple others in the UFC. So I wonder what Dos Anjos plans to do here. I think it's going to be very risky, 25 minutes, this fight, and I don't expect Dos Anjos to take down Ferguson at will like he did against Anthony Pettis. And don't know if Dos Anjos really wants to take down Tony Ferguson. Because Ferguson's guard game, he's a 10th planet guy under Eddie Bravo. All those guys have very, very tricky submissions. So that'll be some risky business, even though Dos Anjos is excellent on the ground too. Another black belt. You don't want to mess with a guy that can sprawl and then Darce choke you, because that's Tony Ferguson's game. So shooting double legs and risking that chance of getting choked out. Don't know if that's going to be in Dos Anjos' game plan. My opinion, I believe he'll just pressure Ferguson up against the cage, keep him on the outside of the octagon, skirting along the cage, and just constantly putting body kicks to him, combinations. Can't wait for this fight. Winner of this might get a title shot, but you do have Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is the rightful number one contender in the UFC. He fights Michael Johnson at UFC 205. Who knows? Maybe if it is said that Conor McGregor, if he wins the lightweight belt, I mean, regardless if he wins or loses, it's being rumored that he's going to take a break from fighting. So if he does win the lightweight belt and steps aside and takes a break, you can have the winner of this fight take on the winner of Michael Johnson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, and that would just be an amazing number one contender fight. Co-main event, Diego Sanchez versus Marcin Held. Interesting fight to give Held for his first UFC fight. Diego Sanchez on his way out. He just got knocked out by Joe Lozon at UFC 200. He did beat Jim Miller at UFC 196, though, before that loss to Ricardo Lamas. He's at the end of his road, too. He's been the same fighter for a very long time, just pushing forward and making sure you can't breathe. Just a wild, wild man. And Marcin Held is a leg lock specialist, so we'll see if he can pull one off in his debut against Diego Sanchez. Sanchez has, he did use some takedowns against Jim Miller. Don't think you'll see that against Held. Held is just spectacular on the ground, so hopefully you get a nice submission in that fight. It will be a cool welcome to the UFC for Marcin Held. Introduce him to fans. There should be a lot of people watching this one. People are desperate for UFC action after 3 weeks without it. Ricardo Lamas versus Charles Oliveira. This fight, pretty similar to the Smolka versus Bork fight I just talked about before. Lamas, the wrestler. Oliveira, the jiu-jitsu expert. And Lamas does sometimes stick to his feet and just try to win fights from there, but his bread and butter is his wrestling. I do want to see some grappling exchanges between these guys because that would be really fun. Oliveira is absolutely one of the best grapplers at featherweight right now. Calf slicer. Nobody pulls off calf slicers. He did that in the octagon, among a couple other things that he's pulled off in his career. Beneil Dariush versus Rashid Magomedov. Magomedov is just an excellent striker from Russia. And Beneil Dariush, very solid all-around fighter. Black belt in jiu-jitsu. You don't want to mess with him on the mat. Even though he is coming off a submission loss against Michael Chiesa. My bet he is coming off a knockout against James Vick most recently. And Rashid Magomedov coming off a decision victory against Gilbert Burns. That happened in November. It's been a while since Magomedov last fought. And he can just strike you from anywhere. He can either counter, lead. Very, very well-rounded. Very versatile on the feet. And I expect him, this should be his coming out party of sorts. Not very well known. He's 4-0 in the UFC, but all on preliminary portions of cards. And people consider him just another Russian fighter, but this man is special. He's ranked 15th by the UFC now at lightweight. And mark it down. This is his coming out party. Beneil Dariush, not very special on the feet, you should say. It's his ground game that really sets him apart. And lastly, Sam Alvey versus Alex Nicholson on the Fight Pass prelims. Alex Nicholson can get hit. He was knocked down by Devin Clark before winning by knockout later in that round. And Sam Alvey is a knockout artist. Knocks out everyone with that counter left hand. So that's what I expect to happen on Fight Pass this weekend, November 5th. Sam Alvey by first round knockout against Alex Nicholson. So we'll be back on Sunday to break down everything that happened in Mexico City. Same time, same place, vicradio.org, 7 a.m. Thank you for listening.